Hello, my name is Ralf Friedrichs. I'm an addiction recovery coach and the host of the Take Your Life Back Today show. As an addiction recovery coach, I want to share something with you, and let me be crystal clear. Imagine being buried alive. You're in a coffin, but you know you're not dead. You don't know how to get out, so you tried lifting the lid. The enormous weight upon the lid prevents you from opening that lid. So then you think to yourself, what if I bang on the lid? Maybe I'll unsettle the dirt and somebody on top might notice and start digging their way down towards me. This is what it's like to find yourself at the lowest point of alcohol and drug addiction. You know you need help, you know you can't do it on your own, but you don't know where to turn. You just think you're just going to die. Usually, though, people don't think about death when they're habitually abusing drugs and alcohol. In order to feed an addiction, you have to be great at repressing the fear of death. I often ask you, my audience, did it ever cross your mind when you were abusing drugs and alcohol that maybe, just maybe, you might overdose and take something away that God gave to you called life? And if that's not selfish enough, what about this? Even more selfishly, you take your life away from the people that love and count on you most. Your husband, your wife, your mother, your father, your children, your grandchildren. With this, let me leave one last thought. Don't be like the person I'm reading about on these index cards that went to their grave not seeking help. You have an opportunity. If you're watching me, you have an opportunity to seek out for help. Now, I'm an addiction recovery coach, and there are thousands like me. I am merely a crutch for you to lean on, but you can lean on me by calling me at 844-405-HELP, and I promise you I will help you take your life back, for your life is gone. And like I said, there are thousands of other people like me, addiction recovery coach, life coaches. People like Larry Geist from the Geist Academy at 516-458-2741, www.odysseyconsultant.org. Larry Geist, and I always tell folks like you, it doesn't matter where you've been, it doesn't matter where you came from. What matters is that you're here and you want help. Larry Geist from the Geist Academy, 516-458-2741. Folks, we are just crutches for you to lean on. You need to combine a sponsor, an addiction recovery coach, a life coach, with the Holy Spirit. God supplies everything you need. Me and thousands of other people are just crutches for you to lean on. We will guide you, but God directs and has a smooth sailing for you throughout life, but you need to reach out for him, and there's no better way than the way I'm going to explain it to you. When you take your slippers off at night, instead of putting them by the edge of your bed, put them under your bed. In the morning when you retrieve them, you'll be on your knees to look for them under your bed, and you say, oh, there they are. Grab your slippers. While you're on your knees, do a thing called knee mail, K-N-E, mail. Knee mail is a direct line between you and God. Tell God, thank God for another beautiful day. Ask God for guidance and direction. Ask God for forgiveness and mercy. Thank God for a home, a family, and food, and a car, and a job. These are all things you should be doing every single morning while you're retrieving your slippers. When you're done praying to God, put your slippers on and walk with God. That simple. Each night take them off. Each morning put them on. Pray to God and walk with God 24/7. Folks, today is July 15th, and last night we had another bombing over in Nice, France. So my topic today is, how do we stop future terrorist acts if the only evidence we always have beforehand to stop people is just the thoughts of people committing acts, or they don't go through with them. But once they go through it, they are so effective. French soldiers on patrol in Paris in January for France, a nation that has one of the largest numbers of citizens fighting for Islamic State, fighting for Islamic State, the caseload of potential jihadists to monitor is becoming unmanageable throughout the world. The first time La Rossi Abala appeared on the radar of French terrorism investigators, the only act of violence they could pin on him was killing bunnies. Now, I bring up Paris because that was the last major incident in France. I cannot talk about Nice because it's too soon. We're less than 12 hours after the bombing, and everything needs to be ironed out. He had joined a small group of men all bent on waging jihad on a trip to a snowy forest in northern France 5 years ago. When he was 19, they videotaped themselves slaughtering rabbits, bought some so the men could grow used to the feel of killing. When he and 7 others were later arrested, the authorities found that several of the men had saved a video of the slaughter on their cell phones along side footage of soldiers being beheaded, according to French court records. Mr. Abala was eventually convicted on terrorism charge and spent more than 2 years in prison. In hindsight, it is not hard to see how the first, how the first act of brutality foreshadowed what happened last January in Paris. Armed with a knife, Mr. Abala attacked a couple of northern France in the name of Islamic State and left them to bleed to death. But at that time of his arrest in 2011, investigators were not able to definitely show that he was a permanent threat to France. After his prison stint, he was placed under surveillance. Just months after the wiretap stop, he committed double murder before the Paris attack. Across Europe and the United States, law enforcement officials are struggling to reckon with attackers like Mr. Abala and Omar Martin, whose shooting rampage during a certain month at a gay nightclub in Orlando, Florida, I think it was like 4 months ago, left 49 people dead. They are men who clearly seem to be building toward violent acts, whose names had surfaced in terrorism investigations, but who avoided crossing the legal lines that could tip off authorities until it was too late. With thousands of terrorism surveillance cases running at any given time, the European authorities say they were swamped and are in the difficult position of trying to head off attacks which they only forewarning is often the form of what someone thinks or what someone overheard somebody else saying. A man in the shop and thinks about steering an object, said George Sugner, a Paris lawyer who was defending several terrorism suspects, including one of the men who accompanied Mr. Abala in the forest in 2011 to slaughter the rabbits. What do? Do you put them in jail? Mr. Savia added, you can't put him in jail unless he takes the next step and attempts to steal something. In late 2010, France's domestic intelligence agency began watching Mohammed Naiz Abdul Rashid, 33, who was living in the Val d'Odise region of northern France, and the agency suspected was a recruiter for Al-Qaeda. The investigation revealed that he had lured 7 aliens, the youngest of whom was Mr. Abala. Under the older man's instruction, the young men met in the public park to do calisthenics, enrolled in kung fu classes, and gathered for lessons on extreme Islam. They also took their day trip to the forest in Corniche-en-Patrie with the rabbits, which they pooled their money to buy. Thirsty for blood is the topic on this paragraph. By the spring of 2011, 2 members of the group had gone to Pakistan, where they were met by facilitator for Al-Qaeda, according to French court records obtained by the New York Times. As most of the junior men, Abala was not chosen to do a mission yet. Although he was thirsty for blood, Allah is my witness, he wrote on an email intercepted by authorities. And another one, he begged, please let me commit the next act of terrorism. When it appeared that it would not be sent to Pakistan, he turned his rage towards France, writing on February 19, 2011, with Allah's will, we will find a way to raise the flag here. A week later, he wrote that his cell would wipe away the infidels. He was arrested on May 14, 2011, and like the other members of the cell, he was convicted on a charge of belonging to a criminal terrorist organization carrying a maximum sentence of 10 years, said Sebastian Bono, the lawyer representing the accused leader of the group. Considered the group's least influential member, Mr. Abala spent more than 2 years in prison and was released in 2013, but he was kept under surveillance until 2015, just last year. It's very easy, retrospectively, with hindsight, to say that law enforcement or government should have known about something that he had intended to do. But obviously there's a big difference between motivation and someone being radicalized and then going out and actually doing or acting on that, said Richard Walton, who led the counter-terrorism unit for the London Metropolitan Police during the 2012 Olympics. At any one time, any country, there will be many hundreds, if not several thousand, suspects that fit this particular profile. Among the difficulties for the authorities in 2011 was that Mr. Abala had aggressively denied any connection to any sort of terrorism. He told investigators he was an atheist. He denied that he had taken any part in practicing beheadings of rabbits. He was not seen on a video, even though the 7 other men in his cell said he had participated, and the members of the group contradicted one another. When pushed, one of Abala's accomplices explained that he had slaughtered the animals in order to have halal meat to eat during the Islamic holiday of Eid, according to a summary of his interrogation. Recent comments were made. Bert Solendia, on June 22nd, 2016, which was only a few weeks ago, we have long since arrived at the point where the notion of true thought police force is technologically possible. Face it, we already know this. We also know that it might be useful to learn what the British experience was using the internet versus prevented detention with domestic IRA terrorists. It's even more futile than the authors of the piece that realize that we need to clamp down on these terrorists. For every would-be jihadist who does something to bring himself, there's going to be 10 more that multiply. It took investigators time to spot the hole in the claim. The forest slaughter was in January, and the Eid al-Holiday had been celebrated 2 months before, in November. Omar Martin, La Rossi, Abala, and Amiri Kulabai, all of whom were known to the authorities before the killing in the name of Islamic State. Locating or trying to find out if they were up to something is like looking for a needle in a haystack. While the legal system may be different, the United States faced many of the same problems in their interactions with Mr. Martin, who, when questioned by the authorities about earlier threats of violence, insisted that he had said those things because he was angry after facing discrimination. After Mr. Martin's massacre, James B. Comey, the director of FBI, said the file on Mr. Martin had been one of hundreds and hundreds of cases across the entire nation. And compared to the task of weeding out those who were expressing extreme ideas from those who act on those ideas, is like looking for a needle in a haystack, in a nationwide haystack. For France, thought to have among the largest number of suspected Islamic State loyalists in Europe, the haystack is at least as big, and some say the caseload has become unmanageable. We are in fact drowning in intelligence, said Alan Bauer, professor of criminology at the National Conservatory of Arts and Crafts in Paris, France. He and others said that there were structural problems, including the fact that France's so-called S-list, a database of people believed to have been radicalized, has over 10,000 names on them and is not ranked any of them according to the threat level. Though most of the lists never commit violence, others have now been responsible for gruesome headlines. 8 of the 10 men who staged the deadliest European terrorist attack in over a decade, the Paris killings in November, were on the S-list, and several had spent time behind bars, yet were able to sneak back into France and Belgium from Syria. Another suspect on the list, Amiri Kalabaili, had also been imprisoned on terrorism conviction. 8 months after his electronic bracelet was removed by French authorities, he killed a police officer and opened fire on a kosher supermarket in Paris in January 2015, leaving more than 4 people dead in the Islamic State's name. If you take your daily agenda and you were to note down the birthday of every single person you know, it would be unmanageable. To try to wish them all a happy birthday, Mr. Bauer said, you need to make a selection. We don't know how to do that with the profiles of the people that we have. Those kind of suspects have created an awkward middle ground for the French authorities, and after a series of plots and attacks, linked to the Islamic State. Over the past 2 years, there is more urgency to find new legal tools to deal with the problems at hand. After Mr. Abala killed a couple in Meganville, France, last week, a deputy in Parliament, Eric Kayati, introduced a bill creating the status of administrative detention for those representing a security threat. In effect, I should say, we are calling for rapid prioritization of the S list, and he said that the bill would be aimed at immediately detaining hundreds of those deemed to pose the highest risk, placing them under house arrest or in a detention center. He called the measure necessary because the penal code is based on proving that an individual is not just talking or thinking about committing an act of terror, but he has taken steps towards carrying it out. These people are known to us, he said. I want to be able to take prevention or preventative actions. Prime Minister Manuel Valls said last week that he would consider the proposal, but there would be no guarantee. This would not be a Guantanamo in France, the French newspaper reported. Jean-Charles Broussard, the chairman of the French Center for the Analysis of Terrorism in Paris, called the idea absurd and said Paris could not jetson civil liberties. He added that putting anyone on the S list under surveillance was impossible because there are about 10,000 names and fewer than 5,000 agents. It takes 20 agents per suspect for 24-hour surveillance, he said, meaning France could perform round-the-clock surveillance for only a small fraction of those suspected of being radicalized on that list. My profound conviction is that unfortunately we need to get used to living with this new threat, Mr. Broussard said. It's permanent, it's diffuse, and it can erupt at any time, at any location. Jihad and vengeance. The streets in Magnville, a community of about 5,600 people, less than 40 miles from Paris, are lined with neatly trimmed hedges. It was here where Mr. Abala waited last week for an off-duty police officer, Jean-Baptiste Salvagin, to come home. As the neighbors watched the horror, Mr. Abala stabbed Mr. Salvagin in the street and left him bleeding in the driveway, then forced his way into the house. There, he stabbed to death Jessica Schneider, the officer's longtime partner, as the couple's 3-year-old son watched. In the time it took the police to close in and shoot Mr. Abala dead, he paused to upload a Facebook Live video. He had prepared a long speech, and sound of flipping pages could be heard as he spoke. First of all, I pledge allegiance to Amir al-Mu'minin Abu Bakr Bahali. He began, referring to the leader of the Islamic State, using a similar formula to pledge uttered to Mr. Martin, who called 911 from the nightclub to dedicate his violence to the terrorist group. In a long rant captured on video, Mr. Abala's thoughts returned to the frustration he felt in 2011 when he begged to be allowed to be abroad to wage jihad. I addressed this also to the French infidel authorities. This is a result of your work. You closed the door to my hira, he said, using an Arabic term for pilgrimage for the same Islamic State devotees who had come to me to travel to Syria and Iraq to join the group. You closed the door towards the lands of the Caliphate. Well, good then. We have opened the door to jihad onto your territory. Folks, what happened last night in nice Paris? People were just celebrating a holiday. Fireworks were going off. Children playing everywhere. Children in the water because it's the French there. And the truck just came barreling down the street. Almost went for a whole mile, just hitting anyone and anything, even went on the sidewalk. And if that wasn't bad enough, he even started shooting at people. Right now, the death toll stands at, I believe, 88, with over 70 people still injured, 15 to 20 of those critically injured. So the death toll might rise to 100. At what point do we finally put our foot down and say, we've had it, enough is enough? Make the right decisions when you pick a president with the elections coming around. Field both candidates and see which one would make our world a safer world. Reach to God, pray to God, ask for guidance and directions on how to vote. Look at what they stand for. And please, utilize common sense wherever you might go. Look out for anything suspicious. See something, say something. Anything that looks suspicious does not hurt to bring to the authorities' attention. I hope to God you enjoyed this segment. I hope and I pray that all the relatives and the deceased can somehow, well, the deceased really can, but that the relatives somehow can move on and know that tomorrow is a new day. I hope to God you have a great day, and may God bless you.